the sharks adorable?" my daughter-in-law, Claudia Carter, said sweetly, right before she pushed me off the yacht. My son Nathan just stood there smiling. Their plan was simple: to seize the $3 billion inheritance they'd been craving for years. But when they came home that night, still practicing their grief for the cameras, I was already in my favorite armchair, with a very special little surprise waiting just for them. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. 6 weeks after my hip surgery, the phone rang with a voice I hadn't heard in too long, warm, careful, rehearsed. "Mom," Nathan said, breathy with concern he'd ironed flat. "How would you feel about a little celebration? Just the three of us, like a real family again." I should have known better. But when your only son calls after months of silence, even common sense starts sounding petty. Since Richard died, the condo had been all hum and echo. No spoon on porcelain, no shoes in the hallway, just the refrigerator's drone and the dull ache of being unnecessary. So when Nathan said celebration, I heard forgiveness. When he said family, I heard home. I'd love that, I told him, and meant it. An hour later, a courier arrived with an embossed card, heavy stock, our crest pressed in gold, confirming pickup at 9, marina at 10. It was Nathan down to the comma. Tidy logistics, polished sentiment, no room for questions. The next morning, a black car slid to the curb. The driver knew my name, my building, my preference for the front seat. Details Nathan remembered when it played well. The city was washed clean from last night's rain, sunlight sharp on the windshield. At the marina, the yacht waited, 42 feet of white shine named Serenity, a joke so on the nose it almost felt kind. I recognized the model. Months earlier, Nathan had shown me a brochure during his pitch for the consulting venture. $3 million of seed capital from me had bought more fiberglass than clients. Nathan came down the dock in designer sunglasses, hugging me just long enough for the bystanders to see. He smelled of expensive citrus and something colder, a metallic edge beneath the charm. "You look incredible, Mom. Sea air, best medicine," he said, tone bright enough to carry. "Doesn't she look amazing, Claudia?" he added, loud enough for the deckhand to hear. Claudia joined us in white-on-white dress, smile, manicure, diamonds scattering light like a warning. She kissed both my cheeks, all perfume and no pressure. "We've been so excited," she said, voice syrup smooth. "It's not every day we get our matriarch back on her feet." Matriarch. The word landed like a blade wrapped in velvet, flattering and final at the same time. On board, they fussed. Cushions fluffed, sun hat adjusted, sunscreen offered, sparkling water poured as if hydration could fill a 6-month silence. Nathan narrated the weather like a host. Claudia arranged my cane a precise distance from the rail, smiling when I noticed. Her phone lay face down on the table, camera dotted with fingerprints, screen lighting up and going dark in neat intervals. She laughed easily, the kind of laugh that arrives on cue. I tried to match their cheer. "How's the venture going?" I asked, light as possible. Nathan's smile didn't flicker. "Promising pipeline. We're in the quiet phase," he said. "The way people say don't ask for documents. Today isn't about work. Today's about you." I nodded. I wanted to let that be true. Richard would have asked me to bridge the gap, Maggie. Meet him halfway. I'd even worn the navy dress he always loved, pressed the night before like a truce. As Serenity eased out of the slip, the dock fell away, and with it the small protections of land. Nathan stood at the helm with practiced ease, waving to no one in particular. Claudia adjusted my shawl a second time, her fingertips cool and efficient. She didn't miss details, she curated them. "Just the three of us," Nathan said again, softer now, an echo of a child asking for another bedtime story. He touched my shoulder and I let the moment sit, heavy and almost beautiful. But when I glanced up, I caught it. A quick exchange between them. Claudia's raised eyebrow, Nathan's fractional nod. the kind of silent conversation couples have when they're finishing a plan, not starting a day. The yacht smelled of salt and sunblock and something else I couldn't name, anticipation maybe, or the varnish scent of performance. Their kindness was immaculate, their timing exact, their smiles calibrated to the inch. I told myself this was what healing looked like. Awkward, hopeful, a little staged. I told myself Richard would want me to try. And yet, as we cleared the breakwater and Gloucester shrank to a postcard, the truth edged in around the light. This wasn't a reunion. It was choreography. Their sweetness wasn't soft, it was sharp. And I, dressed in navy, choosing hope over instinct, wasn't a guest. I was the centerpiece. At first, it almost felt genuine, the kind of family lunch we hadn't shared since Richard died. The air smelled of sea salt and citrus sunscreen, the kind of smell that almost tricks you into thinking life is simple again. The yacht rocked gently under the sun, soft waves lapping against its hull like a lullaby. For a moment, I let myself believe in the illusion. Nathan was talking about the weather, stocks, and weekend plans, like we hadn't spent the last year orbiting each other like strangers. He poured me a glass of champagne, crisp and cold, the bubbles catching the light like tiny lies. "Come on, Mom," he said with that easy, boyish grin that used to melt me when he was small. "Just one toast to new beginnings." I hesitated. "You know I shouldn't drink much after the surgery." He waved it off, the way men who've already made up their minds always do. "One glass won't kill you. Besides, we're celebrating. You're back. You're healthy. You're you again." Claudia chimed in, that honey-slick voice of hers coding every word. "You really do look wonderful, Evelyn. So strong, so sharp." Her phone rested beside her drink, screen dark, lens angled toward me. It wasn't carelessness, it was choreography. I saw my reflection on that black glass and wondered how many rehearsals they'd needed to make this look so casual. I smiled politely. "Your father used to say I had 9 lives." Claudia's laugh rang false, too bright against the hum of the motor. "Let's hope you don't need all of them." Her tone carried something sharp beneath the sweetness, like sugar dusting a blade. I should have caught it then, the way Nathan didn't look up from his glass, the way the deckhand turned away just a second too quickly, but hope makes fools of mothers. For a while, the conversation danced harmlessly. They asked about my recovery, my physical therapy, the condo I'd downsized into. Nathan complimented the view I didn't have. Claudia complimented the independence she resented. I answered politely, the way I'd been trained to smooth over every rough edge of motherhood with gratitude. Then Nathan's tone softened, gentle, careful, too smooth. "Mom," he began, "we were thinking, now that Dad's gone, maybe it's time to simplify some things. The trust, the estate, the accounts. We just want to make sure everything's handled the right way." Something cold uncoiled in my chest. "Handled by who?" "By us," he said quickly, smiling as if the word us still meant family. "You've done enough. You deserve rest. Dad would want me to take care of things." Claudia reached across the table, fingertips grazing my hand, her nails immaculate and cold. "You're lucky to have him, Evelyn. Most sons wouldn't be this responsible." She left her phone recording in plain sight now, pretending to check her reflection in the blank screen. Her gaze flicked up only once, sharp as a scalpel. Then Nathan reached into his leather bag and slid a folder across the table. The folder's weight made a soft, final sound against the teakwood. I recognized the seal before he even opened it. "This," he said smoothly, "is just a formality. You signed it after surgery, temporary power of attorney. We just need to make it official." My throat tightened. "I never agreed to that." He leaned back, tilting his sunglasses down just enough to let me see his eyes. They were calm, clinical. The same eyes that used to look for me across a soccer field were now calculating distance. "You were on medication," he said gently. "You might have forgotten." Claudia tilted her head, that manufactured sympathy like perfume, sweet until it choked you. It's for your own safety, Evelyn. You've been through so much. And, well, she smiled faintly, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. Sometimes older patients get confused. It only takes one missed dose, one mix-up, especially out here, so far from shore. Her tone was soft, softer than mercy, but the thread inside it cut clean through the hum of the sea. I set my glass down carefully, making sure it didn't tremble. Is that a warning, Claudia? Her eyes glinted. A reminder. Nathan sighed, performing disappointment like it was a line he'd practiced in the mirror. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're just trying to protect you. Protect me. That word again. The polite knife behind the smile. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly but completely. The years of motherly guilt, of excuses made for his distance, for his wife's disdain, all fell away like dead skin. I looked at him, my son, my only son, and saw nothing of Richard in him. Just ambition dressed up as concern. Protect me? I said quietly. From what? From my own life? He didn't answer. He just glanced at Claudia, a small, silent cue. The sea shifted under us. Time seemed to bend, stretching thin as thread. I pushed back from the table, my cane scraping against the deck. Go to hell, I said, each word steady, deliberate. Claudia smiled, the kind of smile people wear before they light a match. Suit yourself. Then came the push, smooth, practiced, efficient. Cold steel at my back, colder hands on my shoulder. The sky tilted, the sun flared white, and the railing vanished beneath me. For one split second, I saw their faces framed by sunlight, my son's unreadable, Claudia's calm and flawless, and understood, finally, that this had been rehearsed. Every smile, every toast, every word. The world flipped. The champagne glass shattered. Then came the sea, black, brutal, and absolute, closing over my head, swallowing the sound of my scream, and taking with it every last illusion I had about love, family, or forgiveness. The salt burned my throat, light fractured above me, gold dissolving into gray. I kicked, reached, broke the surface for a breath that tasted like panic and betrayal. Their silhouettes leaned over the railing for one final moment, not to save me, but to make sure I was gone. And then Serenity, that cruelly named yacht, slid away, leaving nothing behind but the echo of the motor and the woman they thought they'd erased. The ocean should have taken me. It tried to. The waves slammed into me like punishment, relentless and cold, dragging me under and spitting me back out just to remind me who was stronger. My dress tangled around my legs like chains, my lungs burned, my hips screamed with every kick. I gasped for air that wasn't there and swallowed salt instead. Sharp, burning, alive. Somewhere above the roar, I thought I heard laughter. Faint, distant, or maybe just memory. Nathan's voice, soft and civilized, saying, "Just one toast." Claudia's perfume still clung to my skin, even as the sea tried to wash it away. For a split second, I stopped fighting. I let the water close over me, let the darkness press in, heavy and merciful. Maybe this was the ending they wanted, the quiet, convenient kind. But then, out of nowhere, Richard's voice surfaced in my head, low, steady, unmistakable. The sea always gives back what doesn't belong to it. And that's when I kicked. Pain shot through my hip, but I kicked again, harder this time, clawing my way upward until my head broke the surface. The world exploded in light and noise, sky, wind, water, all colliding at once. I screamed, though it came out like a gasp. My arms flailed uselessly against the waves. For one wild moment, I thought I saw the yacht far away, a white blur on the horizon, shrinking, vanishing. They didn't even turn around. That was the moment I stopped being their victim. The light came minutes later, not the sun, but a harsh beam cutting through the dusk. A man's voice, rough and commanding. "There! Port side. Strong hands seized my arms, dragging me up like driftwood. The deck slammed against my back. I coughed, choked, retched up half the ocean. The smell of diesel and salt filled my nose. "Jesus Christ, she's alive," a voice said, astonished but grounded. I blinked, vision swimming, into the lined face of a man with gray hair and eyes like steel softened by time. "Harbor Authority," his cap read. "Name's Harold Dawson," he said, kneeling beside me. "You're lucky, ma'am. Another 10 minutes and you'd have been gone." Behind him, a younger man hovered. His grandson, maybe. "Grandpa, should I call it in?" I grabbed Harold's sleeve with trembling fingers. "No," I rasped. "Please don't report me." "Not yet." His brow furrowed. "They're an accident." "Yes," I said. "But if you file it, they'll know I survived." "They?" he asked carefully. "My son," I whispered. "And his wife." Something flickered across his face. Disbelief first, then understanding. He didn't ask another question. He just nodded once. The kind of nod men give when they recognize quiet truth. "All right," he said simply. "You're coming with us." Liam, the grandson, wrapped me in a blanket, his hands clumsy but kind. The heater below deck rattled to life, and for the first time since the push, I let myself breathe. My reflection in the cabin window looked unrecognizable, a ghost dredged from salt and betrayal. But my eyes, though rimmed red and hollow, still burned. They took me to a small fishing village north of Gloucester, where the wind howled through pine trees and sea mist hung low over the roofs. "An old friend of mine," Harold said as we approached a modest wooden house. "She doesn't talk much." Lucille Wong answered the door. 70, small, silver-haired, her face was a map of years and calm defiance. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't flinch at the sight of me, barefoot, shivering, eyes wild. She just opened the door wider and said, "Come in before the storm takes the rest of you." Inside, everything was warm. The smell of ginger tea, a fire crackling low, the quiet dignity of a home that had survived too many winters to fear another. Lucille wrapped me in a robe, pressed a cup into my hands, and said, "You can rest here. No one asks questions here." That night, as rain lashed against the window, I sat by the fire, every muscle aching, staring into the flames until they blurred. The image of Nathan's face kept flashing before me, his stillness, his faint smile as I fell. That was what burned the most. Not the betrayal, but how easy it had been for him. I thought of Richard again, of the promises he'd made, the legacy he'd built, the family he'd believed in. And I knew, if I died, it would all belong to people who had murdered for convenience. By dawn, something inside me hardened. The storm had passed, leaving the world eerily still. Lucille was already up, humming softly as she poured coffee. "I know that look," she said when she saw me. "You're not planning to disappear quietly." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "Not quietly, but they'll think I have." I straightened my shoulders, the ache in my hip a reminder that I was still alive. If Nathan and Claudia wanted a ghost, I'd give them one. Let them throw a funeral. Let them bask in sympathy. Let them think they'd won. And when the last flower wilted and the condolences faded, I'd return. Not as the mother they buried, but as the storm the sea had given back. The next day, the news spread like perfume, sweet, expensive, and entirely manufactured. Every outlet carried the same, neatly scripted tragedy. Evelyn Carter, widow of industrial magnate Richard Carter, presumed dead after a tragic yacht accident off the coast of Massachusetts. The words, "presumed dead," were wrapped in sympathy, but what they really meant was conveniently gone. They even quoted Nathan, "My mother adored the ocean. It's where she would have wanted to rest." His voice, calm and composed in the TV clip, was the same one he used in board meetings. Not grief, but performance. The obituary was worse. Devoted philanthropist, loving mother, visionary investor. Someone had edited it with the precision of a PR agent, likely Claudia herself. They'd polished me into a saint just shiny enough to bury and forget. My photo, a softened image from a charity gala, stared back at me from the newspaper, smiling the way good women are expected to smile before they disappear. Harold tossed the paper onto the table. "Hell of a story," he said. I traced the edges of my own obituary with a trembling finger. "It's clean," I murmured. "Too clean. No body, no autopsy, no questions. Just the right amount of sorrow to make people stop thinking." By week's end, they announced the funeral. Private, invitation only, held at St. Matthew's Church in Beacon Hill, the same church where Nathan was baptized. The irony made me want to laugh and weep at once. That Sunday, Harold parked 2 streets away. We climbed the slick cobblestones in silence. The afternoon air hung heavy with drizzle, a gray veil over the city, perfect for grief that didn't need to be real. From behind the iron gates, the scene looked like something directed by Claudia herself. Black cars in flawless symmetry. Reporters murmuring rehearsed sympathy. A choir humming soft enough for microphones to catch every sigh. Nathan stood near the casket, the perfect portrait of filial sorrow. His suit was tailored, his posture impeccable, every gesture measured. When he pressed a hand to his chest, the cameras leaned in, eager for heartbreak. "My mother was struggling," he began, voice trembling just enough to feel authentic. "After my father passed, she became forgetful. The doctors warned us it might be the early stages of cognitive decline." He paused to swallow. Timed, deliberate. "We did everything we could. Sometimes, love isn't enough." A collective murmur rose from the pews. Someone sniffled. Someone else dabbed at their eyes. It was grief on demand. Claudia stood beside him in a black lace dress, pearls at her throat, eyes glistening under perfectly applied mascara. When she dabbed her tears with a silk handkerchief, she did it delicately. Not to wipe anything away, but to show the cameras that she could. Her shoulders quivered just once before she leaned into Nathan's arm, a motion so graceful it could have been choreographed. "Look at her," Harold muttered beside me, binoculars steady in his hands. Not a smudge on her face. "That woman could cry for a living." "She already is," I whispered. The priest began to speak, voice solemn, echoing off the marble walls. Claudia's hand clutched her pearls like a rosary. "She was the kindest woman I ever knew," she said, her voice trembling on cue. "I only hope she's at peace now." Peace. The word was a dagger, and I nearly laughed. A low, bitter sound that made Harold glance sideways at me. Rain started to fall harder, streaking the casket in silver. It was polished to perfection, gleaming even under the gray sky, an empty box dressed like truth. Reporters snapped photos of Nathan lowering his head. Claudia placed a white rose atop the coffin, her hand trembling just enough for drama. From my hiding place behind the gates, I watched the scene unfold like theater. The crying, the clutching, the scripted sorrow. The mourners whispered my name like it meant something, but none of them had ever really known me. And yet something else caught my attention, something colder. 3 people who should have been there weren't. Jonathan Pierce, my financial advisor of 20 years. Helena Monroe, my estate attorney. Gregory Hale, the accountant who'd managed every Carter dollar since Richard's death. Not a single one of them in sight. I lowered the binoculars slowly. "They're missing," I said. Harold adjusted his cap. "Maybe they couldn't stomach the lie." "No," I said quietly. "They're too comfortable with lies. They're not here because they don't need to be. They already got what they wanted." We watched as the casket descended into the earth, roses falling like confetti at a parade. Cameras clicked. Umbrellas opened. Nathan's hand rested on Claudia's back, a silent cue for unity, for performance, for optics. I turned away, tucking the binoculars under my arm. The drizzle had turned cold, sharp against my skin. "Let them bury me," I said. Harold's voice was a low growl. And after that, I looked back once more at the church, the crowd, the lie so perfectly staged it almost looked holy. "Then," I said softly, "we start digging." Beacon Hill lay wrapped in fog, the cobblestones slick as mirrors, the air holding its breath. Every townhouse glowed faintly through the mist, soft yellow squares of warmth that made the world feel civilized. But the Carter mansion loomed darker, still, proud, hollow. My hollow. I stood at the iron gate for a long moment, hand resting on the latch I'd chosen decades ago. Richard and I had argued about that gate. He'd wanted something ornamental. I'd wanted something that could outlast storms. Now it outlasted me. The roses I'd planted years earlier brushed against my coat as I slipped through the side path. Their scent, once a comfort, stung tonight. Too sweet, too alive. I'd paid for every inch of this house. The limestone, the imported oak, even the damn security system Nathan bragged about. I knew its patterns, its arrogance. Old habits die hard. Richard had taught me to never trust another person's locks. The decoy fob Liam made clicked against the keypad. One blink, one soft tone, and silence. I exhaled slowly. The world tilted. I was inside. Claudia's perfume hit me like a slap. Something artificial and floral that seemed to coat the air. Beneath it lingered Richard's scent, faint but stubborn, woven deep into the grain of the floorboards. I moved through the foyer, my footsteps swallowed by marble, my reflection gliding past the glass like a ghost too careful to disturb the living. Upstairs, I opened the door to Richard's old study. My chest tightened. It was both the same and entirely foreign. The mahogany desk gleamed under the lamplight, polished within an inch of its life. The wall of books still stood, though a few titles were missing, replaced by awards, magazine covers, photographs of Nathan and Claudia shaking hands with politicians and donors. My family had been replaced by publicity, but the air here felt wrong, too curated, too sterile. I crossed to the filing cabinet Richard had once guarded like a dragon. I remembered his voice. "Some things are too heavy for dinner conversation, Evie." The lock was standard. My fingers worked almost automatically. Click. The drawer slid open. And there it was. A black folder with a seal embossed in silver. The Evelyn Project. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The edges of the paper cut against my gloves as I opened it. My name leapt off the page, again and again, printed on medical reports, neurological charts, psychiatric evaluations. Words swam before my eyes. Progressive cognitive decline, incapacity hearing, guardianship transfer, all written in sterile fonts, void of emotion, as though I'd already stopped existing. Each report had been signed, notarized, stamped. Fake doctors. Fake prescriptions. The handwriting beside them, smooth and looping, had annotated progress like I was an experiment. Phase 1, onset. Phase 2, compliance. Phase 3, termination. My hand flew to my mouth. My pulse thundered in my ears. The word termination blurred as tears burned my eyes. They hadn't just planned to discredit me. They'd planned to erase me. At the back of the file, a letter was tucked into an envelope. Heavy paper, faint scent of lavender ink. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Carter, Phase 3 is ready for execution. Your son will be notified upon completion. VH, Veronica Hale. Claudia's friend from the foundation, the woman with the perfect teeth and colder eyes." She wasn't just a friend. She was an architect of what I now understood all too well. My breath came fast, shallow. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening with betrayal. I stuffed the papers into my coat pocket, every nerve screaming to get out. But just as I turned, a sound froze me in place. A baby's cry. Soft, fragile, impossible. It echoed down the hallway, a sound so out of place in this house that it chilled me to the bone. My legs moved before I could think. The cry grew clearer, cutting through the silence like a plea. I followed it to one of the guest rooms. The door stood slightly ajar, a thin stripe of warm light spilling across the floor. I pushed it open. Inside, a crib. White. New. The kind people put on baby magazine covers. Toys lined neatly on a shelf. A faint lullaby hummed from a white noise machine. On the dresser beside it lay a file folder labeled neatly in Claudia's handwriting, Baby Daniel Amber Carter. My fingers went numb as I opened it. Hospital forms, birth certificate, adoption transfers, and there, the mother's name, Amber Lewis, age 17. Next to it, written in red pen, deceased, complications during birth. My body went cold. The crying stopped as suddenly as it began, replaced by the mechanical hum of the machine. I stared at the crib, my pulse hammering. They hadn't just stolen my fortune. They'd built a child out of someone else's tragedy. Bought, paid for, repackaged with the Carter name. I pressed my trembling hand against the wall to steady myself. It wasn't just greed anymore. It wasn't even betrayal. This was creation by corruption. A system. A machine that erased people and replaced them with property. And now I had proof. Paper, ink, and blood crying from the walls of my own house. I didn't sleep that night. The papers from the Evelyn project lay spread across Lucille's kitchen table, the lamplight trembling against their edges. Every page was a confession written in ink, cold, methodical, signed by hands that had planned my erasure. My name appeared over and over, not as a person, but as a case, a patient number, a liability. I was being studied, measured, and quietly deleted. Anger is strange. It doesn't roar when it first arrives, it whispers. It crawls through your veins, slow and deliberate, until it steadies your hands. And by dawn, I wasn't shaking anymore. I needed someone who could help me turn whispers into action. Someone who knew how to chase monsters that hid behind paperwork and laws. That's when Harold poured another cup of coffee and said, "There's a man in Salem. Used to be FBI, now private. Bit of a hermit, but he's not corrupt. He still believes in doing the right thing. Name's Martin Keene." The blinds were half drawn, the windows smudged with salt from the sea breeze. He looked exactly like a man who'd stopped pretending the world was fair. Late 50s, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, still sharp. A cigarette burned in the ashtray, forgotten. He didn't stand on ceremony. "You Evelyn Carter?" he asked. "I was," I said, setting the black folder on his desk. He opened it, and the moment his eyes hit the title, The Evelyn Project. His face didn't move, but his knuckles tightened around his pen. "I've seen this before," he murmured. "Different names, same pattern." He flipped through the pages quickly, scanning the forged signatures, the medical forms, the fabricated assessments. They call it estate acceleration. "Estate acceleration," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "Pretty term for murder on a timetable," he said. "They find wealthy clients, older, isolated, usually grieving. They start small, confusion reports, misplaced pills, fake doctor visits. Once they control your finances and medical decisions, the rest is paperwork. When the timing's right, an accident seals it." He looked up at me. "Yours was meant to be textbook, a boating death. No body, no charges, no payout delay." The room went cold. "Who runs it?" I asked. He tapped a name at the bottom of one of the reports. Veronica Hale. She runs a consulting firm in D.C., specializing in elder financial protection. That's the public story. Behind it? A network, lawyers, accountants, clinics. Gregory Hale, your accountant, handles the books. They funnel the inheritance money through shell charities and offshore accounts. Most people don't even know they're laundering blood money. I felt my throat dry out. So they built an entire system just to profit from death. He nodded slowly. And your son and daughter-in-law? They were the latest clients. I stared down at the pages, my pulse hammering in my ears. And the baby? That was when Martin reached into a drawer and pulled out another file, stamped Whitmore Reproductive Services. He opened it to a contract with neat signatures and a watermark that screamed legitimacy. Your grandson, Daniel Amber Carter, wasn't born into the family, he said. He was bought. I blinked. Bought? Martin slid the contract across the desk. Whitmore is a front. They handle off-record surrogacies for the wealthy. Heirs for sale, no adoption paperwork, no legal trace. The birth mother was Amber Lewis, 17. Died 3 days after delivery, 'cause listed as complications during birth. My chest felt hollow. You think it was an accident? He shook his head slowly. No, I think she was silenced, same as the others. One less person to tell the truth. I pressed my hands together to stop them from shaking. So this is more than family betrayal. This is a business, Martin said. And it's thriving because it hides behind law and medicine. Every death, every falsified diagnosis, every accident, it's all legal on paper. You're looking at a machine that kills people, signs the forms, and collects the checks. For a long moment, we just sat there. The hum of the old radiator filled the silence. Then I asked quietly, "Can you prove it?" Martin leaned back, his eyes steady, voice flat. "You already have. What they didn't count on was you living long enough to talk. Now we just need to make them incriminate themselves." Something fierce uncurled in my chest. Not fear this time, but resolve. I folded the Evelyn project back into its folder and slipped it into my coat. "Then let's give them their chance," I said. "I've been the victim long enough." Martin nodded, reached over and switched off the lamp. The office went dark except for the faint glow of the city through the blinds. "This won't be clean," he said. "It won't be safe." "I'm past safe," I told him. "I want justice." He gave a small, grim smile. "Good." He stood, silhouette framed by the window. "Because from here on out, Mrs. Carter." He looked at me, voice low, deliberate. "This isn't survival anymore." He paused, letting the silence sharpen around the words. "This is war. Hand-delivered, sealed with the Carter family crest that only I had ever used for personal correspondence. Nathan's assistant found it first, lying neatly on the reception counter at Hale & Partners, the law firm handling their restructuring. She assumed it was another estate document until she saw the sender's name. From Evelyn Carter. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, deliberate, the kind of cursive no forger could replicate. The paper was cream-colored, thick, expensive. My old stationery from Beacon Hill, the one I'd used to write birthday notes to Nathan when he was still the kind of boy who collected rocks and dreamed of flying. Inside was a single folded note. No threats, no explanations. Just one simple message written in black ink. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk. Love, Mom." When Martin and I planned it, I told him it needed to feel inevitable, like the past catching up. No dramatics, no warnings, just a whisper from the grave. He'd smirked and called it psychological warfare. I called it justice served cold. At 10:19, Claudia stormed into Nathan's office mid-call, barking at someone over a postponed fundraiser. "No, tell the donors the foundation dinner goes on." She stopped when she saw Nathan's face. His usual mask of charm had cracked. His skin had gone pale. His eyes darted between the letter and the wall as if the words themselves might crawl off the page. "What is it?" she demanded, impatience bleeding into her voice. He didn't answer. He just handed her the note, his hand trembling slightly. She read it once, then again. The color drained from her face. This isn't possible," she whispered. "She's dead." "We," Nathan hissed. "Don't say it here." His jaw locked, the line between fear and fury blurring across his features. Within minutes, they were gone, abandoning their meeting, their phones, their composure. Veronica Hale called after them from the conference room, her heels echoing down the hall. But they didn't turn back. Outside, Martin sat in a rental sedan with his telephoto lens, snapping photos as they bolted into their car. Claudia stumbled on the curb, catching herself with a curse. He smiled. By the time the Carter mansion came into view, their panic was visible from the street. Headlights cutting through fog, tires screeching against wet pavement. Inside, the house was warm and still. The fireplace crackled softly, shadows flickering over the walls. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one they'd pretended belonged to the late Mrs. Carter. I dressed deliberately. The same navy wool coat I wore the day of the accident, a strand of Richard's pearls, hair swept up neatly, a ghost reborn in silk and firelight. Nora Bennett stood by the window, quiet and watchful, rocking baby Daniel in her arms. The child cooed softly, eyes fluttering in the orange glow. The front door slammed open. Claudia entered first, eyes wild, breath ragged, her composure gone. Nathan followed, his tie loosened, panic barely concealed beneath forced calm. "Hello, darlings," I said evenly, my voice cutting through the crackle of the fire. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Claudia's breath hitched. You're not." "Dead?" I finished for her, smiling faintly. "That was the plan, wasn't it?" Nathan tried to recover, summoning that old charming tone. "Mom, this isn't what it looks like. You thought the ocean would keep your secret," I interrupted, voice still calm, steady. "You thought no one would find me. And when I didn't turn up, you buried me in press statements and sympathy interviews." Claudia's hands trembled. "You don't understand, Evelyn. Things got complicated." "Complicated?" I tilted my head. "You mean murderous." I stood, slow and deliberate, letting every second stretch between us. "You bought a baby from a fertility ring, watched his mother die, and paid to have my mind erased so you could steal $3 billion. Tell me, was it thrilling? Did it feel clever?" Nathan's mask slipped completely now, the panic raw, desperate. "You can't prove any of that," I smiled. "Oh, but I can." From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small recorder. The red light blinked softly in the dim room. "Massachusetts is a one-party consent state," I said. "And this conversation? It's been running for the last 12 minutes." Claudia went white, mouth opening soundlessly. You recorded us." "I recorded everything," I said. "The meetings, the phone calls, the payments to Veronica Hale, the forged documents, even the confession you whispered to Nathan when you thought no one was listening." The fire crackled louder. Nathan's voice dropped, trembling. "Mom, please, let's talk about this." "For once," I said coldly, "call me Mrs. Carter." Nora turned her gaze away, shielding the baby from what came next. Outside, the faint wail of sirens began to rise, growing clearer with each second. Claudia's voice shrank to a whisper. "You wouldn't turn us in." I met her eyes, sharp, steady, unflinching. "You tried to drown me, Claudia, but you forgot something." Her lips quivered. "What?" I leaned forward slightly, my voice soft enough to cut like glass. "Dead women don't send letters." The sirens howled closer, lights flashing red and blue through the front windows, painting the walls injustice. And as the officers approached the door, I sat back down in my armchair, the place they'd stolen, the seat they'd cursed, and whispered to myself, almost tenderly, "Welcome home." Heiress Evelyn Carter reappears. Family under investigation for attempted fraud. TV anchors smiled through rehearsed concern. Commentators speculated about my mental stability, and lawyers in tailored suits gave statements about misunderstandings. Nathan and Claudia had each hired separate legal teams, always a sign of rot beneath the surface. But what the cameras didn't show was what Martin found that morning, a payment routed through 3 offshore accounts, originating from Gregory Hale, destination unlisted. He dropped the printout on the kitchen table of Lucille's cottage, his face carved from stone. "They didn't run," he said quietly. "They doubled down." Lucille poured coffee with shaking hands. "What do you mean, doubled down?" Martin met my eyes. "They hired a cleaner." The room went still. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I stared at him. "A cleaner? What does that mean exactly?" "Former intelligence," he said. "Black ops work for private clients. No names, no records, no trials. When people like Veronica Hale panic, he's who they call. He fixes the unfixable." My stomach clenched. "Fixes it how?" He didn't sugarcoat it. "By making people disappear. Looks like accidents. Car crashes, boating incidents, even carbon monoxide leaks. Hale's used him before." Harold swore under his breath. "We can't stay here then." Martin nodded. "Boat leaves in 30 minutes. We move before dark." Harold's old trawler rocked gently against the dock, its metal hull dull with age, but reliable as faith. The air reeked of diesel and salt. I carried Daniel close to my chest, wrapped in a thick blanket. The baby stirred once, his tiny hand curling against my collarbone. Nora followed with the medical bag, her face pale in the lamplight. Harold helped us aboard. "We'll go around the Cape, hug the coastline until sunrise," he said. "No one will see us." Martin loaded the evidence crates, files, hard drives, the voice recordings, everything that tied Hale's network together. "If anything happens to me," he said, "this box goes to the Boston DA." We set off just after midnight. The sea hissed beneath the bow, fog curling like smoke over the water. Every light on deck was off. Only the faint glow from Harold's compass marked our path. For hours, the only sound was the low hum of the motor and Daniel's soft breathing. Halfway through the crossing, I caught sight of something behind us, distant lights, faint but steady. 2 of them, moving too perfectly to be fishermen. "Martin," I whispered. "Someone's following." He took one look and cursed. "Too fast for a patrol boat." He shut off the lights. "Hold on." Harold veered sharply into the fog, cutting the engine, letting the current drag us sideways. We drifted in silence, hearts pounding, until the glow behind us vanished into the mist. Only then did Harold breathe again. "We're clear. For now." By dawn, we reached the island. Lucille waited at the dock in her robe, hair tied back, the picture of calm. Her cottage stood alone among the dunes, smoke curling from the chimney. "Get inside," she said. "You look like people who've seen ghosts." Wind howled through the cracks, the fire hissed, and the smell of salt hung thick in the air. Martin's phone buzzed once, a message from his contact at the bureau. He read it aloud, his voice low. "Cleaner dead. Hale Cleaning House." I blinked. "Cleaning house?" He nodded grimly. "She's eliminating anyone who knows too much." Cole Stanton's body was found outside a motel in Revere. 2 bullets to the back of the head. "Veronica Hale's burning the trail." Lucille crossed herself. "Then she'll come for you next." Martin's jaw tightened. "Not me." "Not yet." The realization hit me before he said it. I looked toward the small crib by the fireplace. Daniel stirred in his sleep. "She'll come for the baby," I whispered. Martin nodded. "He's the last link. The falsified adoption, the missing mother, the inheritance line. If he disappears, the case dies with him." The room fell silent except for the wind clawing at the windows. I pulled Daniel into my arms, feeling his heartbeat against mine. "They wanted me dead once," I said quietly. "This time, they'll have to come through me." Harold checked the rifle propped by the door. "Then we stand ready." Outside, thunder rolled over the sea like a warning. The storm wasn't over, not for any of us, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about justice, and the cost of it. By the time the rain stopped, the trap was ready. Martin's plan was brutal in its simplicity. Let her come to me. Let Veronica Hale believe she was still in control. The FBI had already wired the house from the baseboards to the chandelier. Tiny mics hidden in the molding, cameras disguised as decorative screws, every outlet feeding back to a van 2 blocks away. Agent Melissa Grant was running the operation herself. Former white-collar crimes, sharp as a scalpel and twice as patient. Once she incriminates herself, we move, Martin had said earlier. No confrontation, no heroics. Just get her talking. Easier said than done. By the time the security gate buzzed, my heart had been pounding so long it had gone quiet. Just a steady, low vibration in my chest. Outside, the black sedan glided to a stop in the driveway, engine purring like something smug and expensive. The headlights carved through the mist, then dimmed as the driver's door opened. Veronica Hale stepped out. She looked exactly as she had in every glossy magazine feature. The immaculate power player. Trench coat belted tight, hair sleek, heels clicking sharp against the stone path. A diamond brooch gleamed at her collarbone, catching the firelight through the front window like a tiny blade. When she saw me standing by the fireplace, she smiled. Not surprise, not fear. Pure amusement. "Evelyn," she said smoothly, voice velvet and poison in equal parts. "You look remarkably well for a dead woman." I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. "You always did appreciate resurrection stories." She laughed softly and walked in like she owned the place, pausing to take in the room. "So this is where the legend lives. Charming. The news said you vanished, but you've always had a flair for dramatics. I learned from the best." She sat down gracefully, crossing her legs with surgical precision. "You made quite the spectacle, you know. Reporters, subpoenas, all that righteous fury. It's exhausting." Her tone softened, falsely sympathetic. "But I'm here to fix this. For all of us." "For all of us," I echoed. "Meaning you. And the people who tried to drown me?" She gave a low, dismissive chuckle. "Don't be dramatic. You were an anomaly, Mrs. Carter. The program was never personal. We provide dignity and liquidity." I tilted my head. "You call it dignity. I call it murder." She smiled. The kind of smile predators practice in mirrors. "Oh, please. We help families move forward. 37 cases, and not one complaint from the deceased. That number, that casual cruelty, it landed in my gut like cold metal. 37, I repeated softly. That's quite a portfolio." Veronica leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Efficiency, Mrs. Carter. That's what separates visionaries from victims." There it was. The sentence Martin had predicted she'd say. He'd called it the arrogance of certainty. I let the silence stretch, the fire snapping faintly behind me. "You sound proud." "Why shouldn't I be?" she said lightly. "Do you have any idea how many broken families I've saved from themselves? Inheritance disputes, trust manipulations, power of attorney conflicts, all dissolved quietly. No scandal, no fuss. People die every day, Evelyn. We just make sure their money lives on where it's most useful." She smiled wider. "That's what I offered your son. A future." Something twisted in my chest. Rage, disbelief, maybe even pity. "You offered him corruption, and he took it." "Of course he did," she said, unbothered. "They always do. But you—" She looked me over, her gaze sharp as glass. "You're different. You were supposed to die clean. I underestimated you." I met her eyes, unblinking. "Everyone does." For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. The fire cracked. Rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere in the walls, a tiny red recording light blinked. Unseen, patient. Then came the faint click from behind the bookshelf. Veronica's eyes flicked toward the sound. Before she could process it, the front door exploded open. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hands where we can see them!" The room erupted into motion, boots, flashlights, shouting. Veronica froze mid-step, color draining from her face. Agent Melissa Grant stormed in first, her badge glinting in the firelight. "Veronica Hale, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and multiple counts of homicide disguised as medical malpractice." For the first time, the Queen of Composure faltered. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice cracking around the edges. "You have no proof." Melissa nodded toward me. "We have plenty." Veronica turned slowly toward me, disbelief melting into fury. "You set me up." I held her gaze, calm, steady. "You set yourself up. I just pressed record." Her lips parted in a soundless curse as Melissa cuffed her. Agents flooded the hallways, collecting folders, seizing computers, documenting evidence. The quiet hum of efficiency replaced the chaos of power, a sound I'd waited months to hear. Then the side door opened, and 2 more agents stepped in, escorting Nathan and Claudia. They both stopped dead at the sight of me. Nathan's face went ghost white. "Mom!" Claudia stumbled forward, mascara streaking for once. This can't be real." I smiled faintly, feeling the calm weight of justice finally settle in my bones. "You always did underestimate me, darling." Nathan tried to find words, but his mouth only opened and closed, like a man drowning on dry land. Claudia turned to Veronica, panic sharpening her tone. "You said it was handled." "You said she was gone." Veronica jerked against the cuffs, rage blazing in her eyes. "You idiots should have stayed quiet." Melissa's voice cut through the shouting, firm and cold. "Enough, all of you." The agent separated them, reading charges aloud. Wire fraud, attempted homicide, human trafficking under the guise of medical surrogacy. Each word struck like a hammer against stone. Claudia began sobbing, hysterical, her voice breaking into confessions half mumbled and half denied. Nathan just stood there, staring at the ground, his world finally stripped of the illusion of power. As Veronica was dragged toward the door, she turned back one last time. Her voice was low, venomous. "You think this ends with me?" I looked toward the window where dawn was beginning to gray the horizon. "No," I said softly. "This ends with truth." Melissa approached me, lowering her voice. "It's over, Mrs. Carter. You did it." But I knew better. As the last agents filed out, the scent of rain and cordite still hanging in the air, I glanced at the chair across from mine, the one Veronica had occupied with all her false confidence. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as a woman who had taken her life back, piece by piece, from the very people who thought they could erase her. The house was quiet again. Only the faint hum of the recording devices remained, the echo of justice captured, one confession at a time. And as I looked toward the doorway where my son had stood, lost, broken, small, I felt no rage left, only clarity. They had buried me once, but I had risen, not to haunt them, to end them. The courthouse smelled of rain and marble, cold, polished, unforgiving. 9 months. That's how long it took to bring them all down. 9 months of hearings, depositions, witness statements, and the slow, merciless grind of justice. Every day, the headlines screamed my name like a ghost story. The widow who outsmarted the system. Evelyn Carter testifies in multi-million-dollar estate murder ring. I didn't want the spotlight. I just wanted the truth to stick. The first trial belonged to Veronica Hale. She arrived in court in a beige suit and pearls, as if she were attending a board meeting, not facing 37 counts of homicide, fraud, and racketeering. She even smiled for the cameras. Martin sat beside me in the gallery, jaw tight, arms crossed. "She's going to try to charm the jury," he murmured. "She always does," I said. When the prosecution played the recordings, her voice boasting about 37 cases and no complaints from the deceased, you could feel the air shift. The jurors leaned forward. The mask began to crack. Melissa Grant testified next, her voice even and precise, outlining the structure of the estate acceleration network, falsified dementia diagnoses, power of attorney fraud, staged deaths passed off as accidents. When she showed the financial flow charts, Hale at the center, lines branching out to doctors, legal staff, and estate trustees, you could almost hear the audience's collective breath catch. Veronica didn't look at me once during the trial, not when my name was read as a target, not when photos of my accident were displayed, not even when the recording of her own voice filled the courtroom. But she looked at me when the verdict came in. Guilty, on all counts. Life imprisonment, no parole. Her hand twitched once, the only sign she'd heard. As the bailiffs led her away, she turned her head, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with venom. "You think this will stop it? There are others." I met her gaze and said softly, "Not anymore." Smaller courtroom, fewer cameras, more ghosts. I hadn't seen my son since the night of the raid. When he entered the courtroom, I barely recognized him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something gray and hollow. Claudia walked beside him, still wearing her designer dress, though it hung awkwardly now, like it belonged to another life. They didn't sit together. The defense had split their cases, each hoping to lessen their sentence by shifting blame onto the other. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, one clean strike that silenced everything. The prosecution spoke first, presenting evidence of financial conspiracy, the attempted homicide at sea, and their involvement with Hale's network. Photos flashed on the monitor. The yacht, the altered medical reports, my forged signature, the fake adoption papers for baby Daniel. Nathan's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, stress, manipulation, grief. Claudia's attorney painted her as a victim, a naive woman drawn into the orbit of powerful people. But the recordings didn't lie. The tape of Nathan's voice, "It's better this way. She won't feel anything in the water." The photo of Claudia smiling beside the crib, labeled Baby Daniel Amber Carter. The digital transfers to Hale's accounts, millions siphoned through dummy corporations. By the third day, even their attorneys looked defeated. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom went silent. I walked to the stand slowly, leaning on my cane, and looked straight at the son I had once rocked to sleep. He couldn't meet my eyes. "My husband Richard built our family with hard work," I said softly. "He believed in legacy, not wealth, not status, but integrity. That's what makes what happened so tragic. They didn't just steal money. They tried to erase conscience. They tried to erase me." My voice never rose. It didn't need to. The truth did all the work. When the sentencing came, the judge's tone was heavy, deliberate. Nathan Carter, 25 years in federal prison for attempted homicide, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. Claudia Carter, 20 years in federal prison for aiding and abetting fraud, falsifying medical records, and involvement in human trafficking through reproductive manipulation. No parole within the first 15 years. The gavel struck again. Claudia broke first, sobbing uncontrollably, collapsing against her lawyer, whispering, "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far." Nathan didn't cry. He just stared straight ahead, expression blank, lips trembling but silent. When they stood to be taken away, he finally looked at me. Just once. No apology, no hatred. Only the empty recognition that everything he'd gambled for was gone. He mouthed something I couldn't quite read. Maybe "I'm sorry." Maybe "goodbye." Either way, it didn't matter. Over the following months, the arrests kept coming. 17 more. A network of polished criminals. Physicians, attorneys, notaries, even a sitting judge who'd signed off on multiple fraudulent estate transfers. The Bureau's press release called it an unprecedented case of systemic financial exploitation of the elderly. Total assets recovered, $204,700,000. Funds redirected to victims' families, charities, and legal reforms for elder care protection. Martin received a federal commendation. Melissa Grant was promoted. Harold returned to his harbor job, and Lucille finally planted her roses again. I attended none of the ceremonies. My victory didn't belong in front of cameras. The final hearing was a closed session, restitution and estate redistribution. The judge looked at me over his glasses. Mrs. Carter, as the primary surviving heir, you're entitled to reclaim your full inheritance and properties. Do you wish to contest or amend distribution? I looked at the stack of papers in front of me, the same kind of documents that had once been weaponized against me. I thought of the people who died quietly, without anyone to speak their names. I'll sign the transfer, I said. All liquid assets to the Carter Foundation for Senior Advocacy. The estates, sell them. Everyone. Let something new be built where greed once stood. The judge nodded, scribbling the order. That's admirable, Mrs. Carter. I smiled faintly. It's overdue. Weeks later, I returned to the sea. Lucille's cottage sat under a sky brushed in silver, the ocean stretching wide and endless. The storm season had passed, but the scent of rain lingered like memory. Harold stood on the dock mending nets. Martin was on the porch writing his report. Nora rocked Daniel near the window, humming softly. I walked down to the shore, the sand cool beneath my feet. The horizon glowed faintly pink, a new day bleeding through the remnants of the old. 9 months of war, 3 decades of silence, one truth that refused to drown. The world would forget the details eventually, the trials, the cameras, the faces. But the system would remember. Laws would change. Doors would close that had once been wide open to people like Veronica Hale. I breathed in the salt air and finally let myself smile. They thought the ocean would take me. But the sea, as Richard once said, always returns what doesn't belong to it. Now, standing at its edge again, I understood what he meant. It hadn't just returned me. It had given me back my purpose. 5 years have passed since the trial. 5 long, quiet years. The world has moved on, as it always does. But I still wake some mornings to the echo of waves and the faint creak of a yacht rail in my dreams. Even peace has a memory. I turned 72 this spring. My hair has gone white, my steps slower, but my heart lighter. The house near the shore in Gloucester smells of salt and roses. The same roses I replanted from the old Beacon Hill garden. They bloomed this year earlier than usual, pink and resilient, like they knew survival when they saw it. Daniel runs between them now, 5 years old with a mop of dark hair and the same curious eyes his mother once had in the photo I keep framed by my bed. He's grown fast, all laughter and endless questions. He calls me Grandma, not because anyone told him to, but because he means it. Legally, he's my grandson now, Daniel Amber Carter. The adoption finalized 2 years ago, after the courts cleared the last of the legal dust. He knows nothing yet of where he came from, not the cruelty, not the lies, only that his mother's name was Amber Lewis, and that she loved him enough to make sure he was safe. When he's older, I'll tell him the rest. The truth deserves patience. Amber's parents write from Canada every Christmas. They send photos of snow-covered lakes, hand-drawn cards from their younger grandchildren, and letters filled with grace I sometimes feel I don't deserve. Her mother, Margaret Lewis, wrote once, "You gave our daughter's boy a chance at the life she dreamed for him. He's safe and loved. That's all she ever wanted." I keep that letter framed in the hallway beside Richard's old compass, the one he used to say, "Always points home, no matter how far you drift." Lucille Wong still runs her little seaside inn, though it's more than that now. She's turned it into a sanctuary, a safe place for older people scammed by family or caretakers, for widows fighting to keep their homes, for the invisible ones society likes to forget. Locals call it the Haven. When I visit, she always pretends she doesn't see me slip a check into her donation box. She'll say, "We don't take charity, Evelyn." And I'll say, "It's not charity, Lucille. It's interest." On kindness, Harold Dawson, my unlikely hero, became a local legend. The Gloucester Times ran a story on him titled, "The Man Who Pulled $1 Million Life from the Sea." He laughed when he read it, embarrassed but proud. His quote at the end still makes me tear up. "Sometimes saving someone means believing them when no one else will." He still drops by every Friday afternoon pretending it's about checking the boat engine or bringing fresh haddock for dinner. He'll stay for tea, grumbling about the cold, and then secretly leave flowers by the porch before heading home. Martin Keene never really stopped working. After the trial, he was offered a position consulting for the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. Every December, a Christmas card arrives in my mailbox, always handwritten, always in the same sharp, deliberate script. "Still chasing the bad ones. Hope you're staying one step ahead, Mrs. Carter. MK." Sometimes he includes a photo from his travels, him standing by an old FBI field office or feeding stray cats near his building in D.C. He once wrote, "You taught me that justice without patience is just revenge in a suit." I wrote back only once, "Patience can still bite, Martin. Never forget that." The world calls people like us survivors. But I've learned that survival isn't about being lucky enough to live. It's about learning how to live after. There are still nights I dream of the ocean, dark, endless, swallowing the sky. In the dream, I'm falling again. But this time, I'm not afraid. I let the water take me for a while, then rise. The sea no longer feels like a grave. It feels like a witness. Last month, I received a letter. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was from Nathan. The paper was creased, the ink uneven, written in a tone I hadn't heard from him since he was 12. It began simply, "Mom, I think about you every day. I can't undo what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I finally understand what you meant when you said money doesn't build family. It only buys distance." I read it once. Then again. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer beside Richard's watch, and closed it. Some forgiveness, I've learned, belongs to God, not to me. The court granted parole hearings for others involved in the case. The doctors, the notaries, even one of the nurses who'd signed off on false death certificates. Some cried for mercy. Some said nothing. Veronica Hale remains in a federal facility upstate, life without parole. The papers say she runs a therapy group for ethical reform. Irony has its own sense of humor. These days, I write more than I speak. Letters mostly. To Amber's parents, to Martin, even to the women I meet through the Haven. But the most important letter is the one I keep locked away for Daniel, to be opened when he turns 18. In it, I wrote, "You were born into chaos, my darling boy, but raised in peace. The world will try to measure your worth in numbers, in bloodlines, in inheritance. But remember, love isn't earned through wealth or name. It's given freely and it protects fiercely. You came into my life when I had every reason to stop believing in family. You reminded me that it isn't something we inherit. It's something we choose, over and over again." Every morning I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch Daniel chase gulls down the beach, his laughter bright against the wind. Nora visits often, though she's finally taken a full-time position at the Children's Hospital. She always brings him new storybooks, and every time he sees her, he runs to hug her knees like she's part of the family, which she is. The house feels alive again, with cooking smells, laughter, and the rhythm of a child's footsteps echoing through its once empty halls. The fireplace still creaks in the evenings, the roses still bloom too early, and sometimes, if the tide is high and the air is still, I swear I can hear Richard's voice carried in the wind, saying what he always used to when life got heavy: "The sea gives back what doesn't belong to it." He was right. It gave me back more than my life. It gave me back my purpose. 5 years later, I've learned that peace isn't the absence of storms. It's the decision to keep walking through them until you find shore. And when Daniel curls up in my lap at night, his small heartbeat steady against mine, I whisper what I've carried through every wave, every betrayal, every rebirth. Family isn't about blood or inheritance. It's about showing up, protecting, and loving without price. Outside, the tide hums against the rocks, calm now, almost tender. For the first time in my long, wild life, I am not waiting for anything to return. I am home.